Hi, this is Cristina Dam, and this is Liberate the Podcast, where we educate, motivate, inspire, and liberate your consciousness. Hi there, welcome to another episode of Liberate the Podcast. Today we're deep diving into that subject that many people don't really talk too much about, sex. But it's a subject that everybody is interested in. And we're not just about like sex, it's sexuality, and we have a wonderful, amazing spiritual psychology coach as well as sexuality and relationship coaching, Kat Trimarco, and she is here and she's going to be doing workshops with us, hopefully quite frequently, but for right now we have one scheduled in just like a month or so. And so I'm excited to see where this conversation goes.
I'm so excited. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, so let's I want to hear a little bit about you, okay? Because you have kind of like those two aspects of yourself, from the spiritual psychology aspect to the intimacy and sexuality and relationship coaching, and you kind of say that you can kind of go both ways as far as the depth of what conversations can go into. So I want to just learn a little bit about you, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I actually feel like as you're asking that, as you're saying that, like I want to talk about combining the two, because to me, sex is one of the most spiritual acts that we can experience with another human being. It's like the place that our own soul and our own spirit merges with our own body in the physical world reality, but then it's also the space where we are merging and experiencing somebody else in this depth and layer that we don't experience people on in a day-to-day interaction, and it was so crazy I would love to just share a bit of my story and my journey in my own sexuality and what led me into doing this work professionally. And that's
what we want to hear.
Yeah, it was so it's crazy to me that the two were ever separated, and it's crazy to me that we weren't ever really taught about sex. And myself, I grew up, what I learned in school was not helpful. And
what little you learned in school. Most people they do like a hour or two, like little quick sex ed class, and it's more laughed upon than it is actually embraced or educated,
and this is the crazy thing is it's like we learn in sex ed in school we learn about health, we learn about our anatomy, but that's it. We don't learn about pleasure, we don't learn about desire, we don't learn about the act of sex itself.
Or about connection and what that means, because as you just said when you started speaking, was that connection or that interaction is something that you don't experience in the normal everyday day-to-day with the outside world. And so you're experiencing something deeper, something more profound, something more connected.
Yeah, at least I believe that that's available to us. And I do believe that the way most of us grow up in a porn culture, that piece of sex isn't emphasized. We see sex as only a physical act of going through these motions and reaching orgasm, and there's so much more depth available. But the most frustrating part for me is that there was no education around this. I didn't learn anything about it. Sex is so taboo to talk about, but then yet we get into partnership, we get into relationship, we enter the bedroom, and we're now suddenly supposed to know, like, oh, now I'm supposed to know my own body. Now I'm supposed to have an intimate connection with my pleasure, with my desire, with my arousal, with my orgasm, and be able to communicate that to another human being. But yet I've been told from multiple sources that this is bad, this is taboo, this is wrong. You don't talk about sex, you don't masturbate, you don't talk about masturbating, you don't, genitals are bad. And then, so we can't have that programming, we can't have that mental programming, that emotional programming, and that shame stored in our own psyche and in our own body, and then enter into the sexual experience free and be able to enjoy and access those deeper states of orgasmic pleasure pleasure and those deeper states of intimacy and connection. So for me, like, that was the big discrepancy. It was like there's this big discrepancy between what I'd been taught, what we grow, and it's not just me. I mean, my story is universal, I believe, for a lot of people. But then desiring that deep connection in the bedroom and knowing intuitively that there was something so much more available and possible, but not knowing how to access it, not knowing how to use my words to speak like what I want, how I want to be touched. And that was crazy. So that's what sent me down this path of I want to know myself. I want to understand my sexuality. I want to understand my desires. And there was another piece in it that I couldn't orgasm with partners.
Okay.
And I could orgasm by myself. I could self-pleasure and in like 3 minutes have an orgasm. But for like 10 years, I couldn't orgasm with a partner. And so I'm like, what's going on here? I know it's not something with my body, because my body is telling me...
Because otherwise you wouldn't be able to by yourself if you like...
Exactly.
So you're like, I just don't understand what this block is.
Yeah, I'm like, my body's capable of it, but there's some block. Exactly like you said, there's some block that when I'm with a partner, I can't go there. And it sent me down a place of deep exploration, of learning my body in a deeper way, of connecting with my own genitals in a deeper and intimate way, and really peeling back like the conditioning and the emotional layers of shame and guilt that I didn't even know were there. That was the crazy thing. If someone had said, do you have shame around sex? I would have been like, absolutely not. Like, that word doesn't even register as something in my mind.
But it's such a collective shame. Right?
It's just there. We don't even know it's in us.
Yeah, because it would be perceived as normal, so then you wouldn't perceive it as an abnormal thing of saying, oh, I have an issue or I have shame, because it's so universal.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head.
But universal doesn't mean that there isn't an issue.
Yeah. And it's crazy as
a country. I mean, I know you're from Canada, but as a country in America, we had to do a Free the Nipple campaign, and it's that whole experience of Janet Jackson, a nipple showing and then all the uproar, like it's like that's the type of culture we are collectively in.
Yeah. And that gets imprinted in us without us even knowing it. And then it shows up in these funky ways in relationship, or even in our relationship with our own sexuality and our own pleasure. And so another kind of issue that I was having when I started on this work was when I was with partners, they would ask me how do you want to be touched? What do you want? What do you desire? And I felt like someone had their hands around my throat, not in a kinky, pleasurable way, but in a way I don't have words. How do I speak these words that I don't even know how to articulate how I want to be touched? And so that just it was years of my own peeling away and reconnecting with what I believe is our truth. Pleasure and sexuality is our truth. It's how we came to be on this planet. It's how we came to be in bodies. And that's beautiful. And as I reconnected with that and started exploring my body deeply, reaching deep states of orgasmic pleasure and healing and dismantling the conditioning.
Now, was this a self journey, or were there any books or classes or things that you explored?
So many. Okay. Yeah. I want to share a story actually, because at first I was I'm so motivated that I'm figuring this out, right? I'm gonna find the books, I'm gonna find the courses, but I felt like I was doing something very taboo, even in that, even in exploring my sex, right? So I'd be on Amazon, trying to find books, and I would order them.
Hiding your phone.
I would, but this is the books would show up at my house, and I lived by myself, and I would hide them covered down in my nightstand. And I lived by myself, and I was this is crazy. This is
interesting.
And I would be aware of it as I was doing it. I'm wow, this is crazy. I'm so embarrassed that
in the nightstand, covered down when nobody else even
lives. And I lived by myself. Because it was that's how deep the shame was, and I didn't even know it was shame. I was just we just don't talk about this. I didn't want anyone to
cover down.
I didn't want anyone to know that I didn't know myself sexually. And then I started speaking about it. Like I started talking to like my women friends about it, and I realized that I wasn't the only one that was like having difficulty with my orgasms or having any of these difficulties in relationship with sexual communication. And as I started to talk, actually I was a hairstylist at the time, so I would talk to a lot of clients and we had like a deep relationship. And the more I talked to people and talked to women specifically about this, I was like, I'm not the only one who was kind of having these issues or having these challenges. I think there's a lot of people going through this, and it's either, like you said, it's just, oh, this is normal, this is how
it is,
this is just how it is, or they were struggling and suffering inside like I was, and just not knowing where to go to find the answers, not even knowing where to start or who to go to.
That's why I stopped you, and I was like, well, what kind of, did you take classes or read books? So, because, if people are listening, well, what does that mean? Where do I start? Because you clearly went through that exploration to the point where now you teach and guide others, right? So that's not even going through it. That's getting to a level of mastery so that you can be the teacher.
So it was a mixture of both for me. It was like my own self-exploration and intuitively like just even like getting in touch with my physical body, not being dissociated. And a ton of books. I started finding like courses and programs online. I even flew to Thailand and studied there.
Really? What did you study there?
I studied Tantra for at a school there. And so I studied a bunch of different modalities, and like literally I'm kind of an all or nothing person. So I was like, I'm all in with this and reading books, studying different modalities. But I truthfully didn't find like one thing that worked for me. It was like I kind of pulled from like, oh, this from this workshop works, this from this course works, this from this modality works. And that's kind of how I created the work I do now. And I approach sex holistically, where I work with my clients now. I kind of grouped it into working on the 4 pillars of who we are as beings. So we're physical beings, we're mental, we have a mental body, we have an emotional body, and a spiritual body. Yeah. So I work on all 4 of those pillars, because that was one of the big missing pieces that I was finding in a lot of books I was reading and modalities I was studying, is that I'm like, okay, well, this is the confusing part, because my body's orgasming, but I'm having blocks with partners. So I knew, like we talked about, that it was more than physical. Yeah. And so I really I played with all these different like pillars, so to speak, and I really approach it now from that holistic standpoint.
Well, it needs to be a table, right? So if a table has 4 legs, if you just, really work on building 2 or 3 of the legs, it might even look like it stands. But it can topple over.
But don't put your cup on it, or it'll...
Yeah, exactly. And so, I think a lot of people miss that when they're working on themselves in different areas, in all areas, is that you have to look at yourself as a holistic being. Yeah. And in that, you can't just overly get it mentally, or overly get it physically, or overly get it, emotionally, or just dive into the spirit. You have to kind of have that balance. Otherwise, it's not going to be a solid foundation.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so you started, diving into these classes. So taking Tantra classes was one of them. Yeah. Buying books on Amazon was another one.
Yeah, and hiding them
face down so that nobody would see, that nobody was even over to see. Yeah. And then what other things did you do?
I did some like physical practices. I started working with yoni eggs, which I'm sure here at Liberate Hollywood you sell so many crystals and deep yoni eggs. Yeah. So I started working with yoni eggs. The class and course that I came across that changed my life the most was the Core Erotic Blueprints. Okay. And that, if anyone who's watching has heard of the 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, I would compare it to that, but as it pertains to us sexually. So each of us, we have a unique wiring in how our physical body is wired to receive sexual pleasure, and how our psyche it plays into that. Yeah. And this body of work was created by a woman named Jaya. And when I came across her, and this framework was like the needle mover for me. Like I said, it'd been kind of like, I'd take pieces of this, pieces of that. But this one where I was like, wow, this really like makes sense. This is really, really tangible in understanding, oh, this is the kind of touch I like to be aroused. Or even like, and this is a piece not a lot of like sex therapists and sex coaches talk about. It's like, what do you need to feel emotionally safe in a sexual experience?
Yeah.
What do you need to create connection, like a heart connection, before being vulnerable and naked and physically
and so many
open with
people,
someone?
if they can't get that emotional, they won't ever get the physical. And so sometimes there's just layered steps, and you know, and sometimes it's the physical step needs to come before the emotional step, but we're all wired differently.
We're all wired differently. And it's like there's not a right, wrong, good, or bad. And this framework for me, and now for so many of my clients that I work with, it gives you like a clear, tangible understanding of how you are in those ways and of what you need, and specifically how to communicate that. How to communicate that. And so for me, when I came across that body of work, and so many of I think every one of my clients that I've worked with has said this, oh my God, I'm not broken. Like, I'm not sexually broken. I thought I was sexually broken because I don't fuck like I see women fucking in porn. And it's like, we map out, and it gives this framework to understand self, and often to understand your partner as well. And then we create a bridge to be able to communicate needs, desires, wants. And then as we do that, then we can really expand into expansion of expression and play in all the different realms. And so much becomes possible sexually.
Wow. Now, is this, so when you say that you work on this and you work on creating a bridge, do you work most of the time one-on-one, in couple situations, and groups? Like, I mean, where do you find that your work is most effective?
When I'm working with someone in private coaching, I usually work with women or couples together. But I think because I speak from a woman's perspective a lot, like I speak from like a heterosexual woman's perspective, that I tend to attract a lot of women clients who have dealt with similar challenges that I've dealt with. I do work with couples, but a lot of the time I can work with just one one person from a partnership, and it shifts the whole relationship. So it kind of will depend on the relationship of people coming to me. Like, sometimes both partners are receptive, sometimes just one partner is seeking the understanding or seeking the depth, and the other one's really resistant to it. So it kind of depends on what I'm working with. Ideally, it's beautiful when both people come and they want to learn together. But truthfully, I work with a lot of single women too.
That's what I was just going to say. I was like, does it have to be in a couple? Because I feel like when you started your exploration, I assume by saying that you lived by yourself and you were hiding your books upside down that you were single.
Years. And I was on that exploration for years as a single person. Because I was like, I want to know myself. So that when I'm then in the bedroom with someone else, I can have the foundation where it matters.
Yeah, because as you were just saying, if one person changes, even if there is a couple, it's going to change both. And so if you change, your vibration, your energy, even who you're attracting as partners, is going to be able to meet you on that spiritual, emotional, and physical level, right? You know?
Exactly.
And so it's, just working on yourself by yourself, you know? So what about when you do these classes? Because, I mean, we're having you come here to understand and discover, you know, your sexual wiring. I think that's the name of the class that you're doing. And, you know, so in that kind of setting, is that something, okay, all singles are welcome, or couples welcome? And what can somebody expect from, like, that type of workshop?
Such a good question. I'm so excited about the workshop because it's one of my favorite, because I love being in the real flesh and teaching and getting to help people with this. So it's open to couples, singles, all sexual orientations. You can come even, it's like if you're in partnership but your partner can't come or doesn't want to come, you can come by yourself. Come as a couple if you are in a couple. If you're in a partnership and your partner's on board with it, I would recommend them coming. But you can come as a single, you can come as a man, a woman, any gender that you identify with, any sexual orientation. It's really, what I'm gonna be teaching is these blueprints. So we'll be mapping out how the body is wired, and specifically like the participants will learn how their bodies are wired to know themselves. And this is a cool thing, is whether you're in partnership or not, if you're single, you'll be learning all the blueprints. You can start to even go into dating situations or go into a new sexual experience, like having this toolkit of communication and of knowing yourself.
Yeah, it's like when people read the 5 love languages and they go on dates and stuff like that, they can pick out how somebody's talking and different things like that, and it almost like pre-screen somebody.
Yeah. And it like when I'm coaching my single clients, a lot of the time I'll be like, use it as an icebreaker too, right? Because this is the other crazy thing, is like for single and dating, again, it's like, oh, we're not really supposed to talk about sex, but then once the door closes and there's consent, it's like, at what point in the dating game do you start talking about it? Like at what stage? And that's something I get asked a lot too, like, well, what stage do I talk about it or bring it up? And so I find like that taking the workshop is a great icebreaker even for that, because it can be light, it can be fun, it can be, hey, I discovered there's these different blueprints, there's these different wirings, I'm wired like this is so cool. And it can be like kind of a soft, like an opening the door without it being too heavy or too serious, or without it feeling like too pressured to the person you're talking to. So in the workshop, we're going to map out all the 5 blueprints.
I was just going to ask you, how many blueprints are there?
So there's 5. There's 5. So we're gonna map it out. I'm actually doing a live demo too, which is really, really exciting, because this is the thing, is again, there can sometimes be a discrepancy between what we learn in our mind and what's in our body, because our mind has so much conditioning, right? Yeah. Especially around sex and desires, that sometimes our mind will even block out certain things that we desire sexually, because it's like, oh, that's bad, that's wrong, I shouldn't want that.
And you don't even know that you're thinking that it's bad and you were wrong and shouldn't want it. And it's just something that you don't even allow yourself to think.
Exactly. Like, I'm just gonna, like, that's in a closet over there, and I don't know it's there, and it's just gonna stay there. And it's like, that could be the doorway to your deepest orgasm and your most amazing sexual connection. So that's why I do the demo. And so the participants of the workshop won't be doing any hands-on work, but I'm going to be demoing it on a demo model so that they can see how to go home and do this, like how to go home and play with these different forms of touch, either on their own body or on their partner's body. So I get really, really excited about that piece to it, because that's a really special component to this workshop.
Yeah, well, they get to see and get it and understand it on like a deeper level. You know, it's one thing to hear theories or to read it in a book, but when you can see things demonstrated.
Yeah. That's where transformation really happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
So keep going. So
you learn like, you gotta come. It's gonna be so exciting.
So you learn these 5 different blueprints. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, where do people go with that after?
So once you learn the blueprints, there's then learning to communicate. Okay. And I touch on that in the workshop too. We don't go as in depth to that.
Because that's another workshop.
Totally. It's like we almost need like different tiers of workshops. But where they go with that is then taking what they've learned home, and now having learned like, okay, this is my blueprint, this is how my body is wired, and starting to play with the different forms of touch, either on themselves or with a partner. And from there, starting to voice, starting to communicate, starting to have conversations with either, again, if you're single and you're going on dates, or in the future, or if you're in partnership, to start to have conversations. And the feedback I've had from this workshop in the past, I've taught it quite a few times, is that people have healing, like just being there, being that they're like, just having you, and I'm sure maybe some people feel like this hearing even our conversation is, a lot of people will say, just you talking so openly about sex and not making it this big deal, it just feels so free. It feels so light. I feel like I just shed years of like weight just being in the room and hearing you. Yeah. And that's always really beautiful for me to hear and to know that people experience that, because that's what we need. There needs to be a space that like, it's okay to learn about this. It's okay to talk about it. Not even is it okay, it's beautiful, it's celebrated, it's exciting.
Yeah.
And that's the energy that I like talking about vibration and and being in vibrational match. Like that's the energy I hold, and that's the energy that I emit when I'm working with someone, and it transfers and they start to get comfortable, and then that helps the communication in the bedroom, because then you're in this whole new vibration around sex. You're in this whole new elevated frequency in, okay, this is safe, this is okay.
In this whole new elevated frequency of self-acceptance, right?
Yeah.
You know? And that confidence or that trust that it's okay to be you, right?
Yeah.
And that I would imagine that a lot of couples have tremendous amount of healing doing this work, even if one person's going to it. Because I see that sometimes a lot of that disconnect in connection creates disharmony in the relationship that creates further disharmony. And before you know it, people feel like they're so disconnected from themselves that they're on their way to a terrible breakup or divorce or separation or something like that. But if they could just connect and re-establish what is for them, you know?
And that was my story too, is I'd had multiple relationships back to back that there were sexual challenges in or sexual miscommunication in. And what I learned is that sex can either be the place where we deepen intimacy in a relationship and we deepen heart connection, or it can be the place that like a wedge is driven in between the relationship. And now that I know what I know now, and I look back and I'm like, oh, if we just had these tools, I also believe that there's a divine, like that everything's meant to be, and I wouldn't even be doing this work if it wasn't for that. But I look back and I'm like, wow, if I had known this existed, or these programs or these workshops, the relationships could have been really beautiful relationships, but I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the understanding.
So I get what you're saying. You're not like regretting and saying that if only you could turn back time.
Yeah.
You're understanding that everything has its course, but you also understand how if you did replay a course, you know, that it would create a completely different outcome.
Yeah. And I guess it's more to my mission to help people who are feeling stuck, and to be like, hey, here, like this is totally solvable. There's a solution here.
Yeah, and at least there's that effort of understanding for the solution, and then at that point, then they know they tried and they connected, and they attempted to have that connection, and maybe even in that, if their blueprint is so different than somebody else's blueprint, you know, maybe they go their separate way anyways.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because I also want to dismantle the sexual incompatibility, because once we have this, obviously there's other components in the relationship, so like maybe if other pieces aren't in alignment, then it is like the best thing to separate and move on and move forward. But with these blueprints and with this understanding, there can be kind of this illusion that, oh, do I have to be with someone who's wired the same way as me? And my experience has been, like, I'm single right now, but I've been with partners who are wired very much the same as me, and I've been with partners who are wired completely different from me, and both have been amazing, beautiful, mind-blowing experiences.
Gotcha.
And I really think it's our own willingness to step into new territory or to explore new territory. And that can be really beautiful, especially if you're already in partnership, because then it's like, oh, I get chills in my body, because then it's like an act of love towards your partner, of like, I want to learn you, I want to understand you, I want to know how to feed you sexually, I want to know how to open those doors where you might have desires locked away, and be the one to explore those with you. And then it becomes, instead of like conflict or a wedge being driven in, it can become this world of like deep connection and elevation and expansion. And like, I've been with partners who are wired very much the same as me, and that is beautiful too, because we kind of speak each other's language and can dance
and know it. And it depends where you're at, and I'm sure that there's out of the blueprints, just like in zodiac signs, right? You know, it doesn't mean that anybody in the zodiac can't date anybody in the zodiac, right? But there might be ones that just find an easier harmonious alignment and understanding that's natural versus, you know, and maybe you don't want somebody that's the same exact blueprint, but maybe there's a similar or a compatibility, you know, or whatever. I mean, I don't know, you know, I'm just I'm just thinking, but I mean, it's nice to know that once you understand, you can choose to meet somebody where they're at.
Exactly. Yeah. And one other thing that I can't remember what you said a few minutes ago, but it triggered this in me of I always say that how we do sex is how we do life. Oh, I think it was when you were saying that that issue or wedge in the relationship can filter out into the whole relationship. And I want to say, not only does it filter out into a relationship, is like, I always say, how we do sex is how we do life. Yeah. So our sexual desires are representative of our desires in life. And when we're cut off and repressed from our pleasure and our desires and who our authentic sexual expression, most people who are living in that place are also living in some way in their life, also not living their fullest expression, not really honoring like that deep soul calling and expression. And I mean, that was my journey as well. It's like, once I unleashed this, I was like, I can't live any area of my life out of alignment. Like when you let the most vulnerable desires out, it's like you want to start living all of your life in desire and in pleasure and truly honoring like who you are. So and
I hear that, the honoring who you are, even more than anything else, I'm hearing in that from me being a therapist too. But it's that if there's that full utter acceptance of the deepest, most quote unquote shamed area of yourself that's hidden, then you can learn to accept every area of yourself, right? And then that freedom allows you to say, wow, maybe I want to actually do this with my life, or maybe I want to go and do that, or you know what, maybe I don't even like these types of clothes or this type of this or that, because you don't realize how everything is this thread, you know? And you pull that thread and you're like, man, your favorite color could freaking change because you could have been just living a perception.
Yes. Oh, and an exercise that I've been asked this on like podcast interviews before, like, where would you tell women to start with, like, and this is for men too. It's not just women. Again, I just speak because I do work with a lot of women, but like, where would you tell women to start? And I say, start by the next time you go out for dinner or you go to the grocery store, ask yourself and ask your body, what do I really desire? Because even with food, we get so much like garbage mentality placed on us that like, this is right, this is wrong, eat this, don't eat this, eat only vegetables, eat only like paleo, eat only, and it's like all these things.
And even in that, like, these vegetables are bad and these ones are good, or these fruits, and like
it changes like, every year. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh my god, it's like, always different.
It was good this month is bad next month.
Watermelon's horrible. Watermelon's the best thing. Celery's
it'll make you live forever. Like celery will be out next year. So it's like, it's the same thing. And so I tell people, like, start there, because a lot of I mean, for people like us, we're kind of in this work, we're in this world, we're living more authentic versions of ourselves. But for a lot of people who feel very far removed for that, it can be that simple of a place to start. Of like, if I'm looking at this menu and I'm like taking all judgments or all mental chatter away from what I should be eating, what I should pick, what's the healthiest, just take all that away. And like tune into your body, because our bodies have immense wisdom, and go like, what do I want? Like, what is the first thing that like catches my attention, that catches my eye? So for anyone watching and listening, I want to give that as like, if you're wondering like, how do I even start to tap into what I desire? Start with that, because our desires are not limited to sex, but I truly believe that desire is the seed of life. Like it is our guiding force. It is what is leading us to our higher calling, towards our greatest expression, to all of it. And yet we live in a culture that has made a lot pretty much everything to do with desire, bad, wrong, sex, money, food, all the things that we naturally as humans want.
And I always say this to people, it's like, well, if you're living this and you're choosing that, like let's say if you're going to a restaurant, it doesn't matter whether you eat that dish or that dish, you know? And to the cook, to the chef or to the waitress or the waiter or whatever, it doesn't matter which dish you're ordering, right? So order what you want in that kind of analogy. But in life, you know, you can be spending your career doing this or doing that. You have a choice.
Yeah.
You know, where you're living, what you're doing, how you're spending your freedom and your free time, you know, like all of those things. I mean, at the end of the day, this is our experience, right? And so we should be guided or allow ourselves to pursue our own happiness. I mean, it's even written on every freaking bill. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You know, like,
but most people truthfully don't know how to start activating that and embodying that. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a whole other conversation. We could have like a 3-hour show about that, about like, well, truthfully, we're the quantum creators. We can have whatever we want. We can create whatever reality
and people get
we
that
desire.
To some extent, like the food. Like, you know, people could have like just going on your food analogy, but people can have a craving for a certain type of cuisine or, you know, whatever, and they can go and eat at that type of restaurant. They can pick that dish that they want. They have no problem knowing that they can manifest that. But then when you take it to, if you can do that, you can do anything, right? But why limit yourself? Why suffer? Why be out of that alignment of joy, bliss, happiness, expansive creation of you? You know, like, what does that serve you playing small? Or what does that serve you limiting your truth?
I think a lot of people are stuck in that and they don't even know it. Like, I mean, I abused drugs and alcohol for 10 years and I didn't know what was available to me. It was like I was just looking around at life and going, is this it? Like, this is what this existence is. This is what I'm here for. If this is it, I don't really want to be here. Like, this doesn't feel good to me. This feels like not what I came to the planet for. And so I have immense compassion for people, and I lost someone dear to me to a drug overdose. And I think when people don't know how to even access that or where to even start, and we get stuck in our own frameworks of reality and we can't even see that's an option. And so, I mean, that's a whole other piece of work that I do with helping people dismantle these emotional and mental constructs and create freedom in all areas of life. Because I really, truly, whether you're spiritual or not, like, we were born as the creators. We were born as these divine, infinite, free beings. And we are here to open a new paradigm of earth, of reality. And so I believe that people who are suffering or are stuck or feel powerless and feel helpless are the most powerful people, in that if they can learn how to turn that around, that's where the power is. And that suffering comes from being stuck in an old paradigm of reality that no longer serves us. But the awakening happens within. The awakening happens in our mind and our emotions spiritually, and then we actualize it externally. And this is the way of the new world. It's the way the world is moving, the direction we're moving in. But there's a lot of, it's almost like within that, the subconscious shadows are bubbling to the surface. And I mean, we see that portrayed politically, we see that portrayed in all these areas, but it's like if you're stuck in sadness, depression, anxiety, fear, doubt, there is another reality available. But get mentorship, get help, because it's hard to know. I mean, I spent a lot of time there. I'm free now, but it took a deep inner work to create this being that I am now.
But in that's, you know, I think that it notes saying again that the people that are in those dark times or those dark moments or those depth areas, you know, when they do get out, they become some of the most powerful beings. because of that overcoming. I mean, you can even take it like on that like metaphor of like how, I don't know, like it's fitness, okay? So if somebody's really healthy and active and fit all the time, you know, and they already exercise, if they run a marathon, it might do something to them, but it might not do much.
Yeah.
But if somebody, they haven't ever accomplished that type of physical challenge before and they cross that finish line, it's not about the marathon, it's about what that shifts in their brain, that they're able to, like, anything is possible after that moment, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and I know that that's like a simple version of it, but to understand that on that level, it's like if you can pull yourself out of the well, you realize that you're more powerful than you can ever imagine.
Yeah.
And that power is going to be unshakable.
Yeah.
Right? And that is going to make you realize that if you can do that, you can create a mountain now. You can paint the sky green if you want it, you know?
Well, and the depth of suffering is the potential for greatness, because no human could experience suffering if they weren't actually blocking their own greatness. But though that's what has to be deconstructed and let free. And I mean, that was for myself, like I suffered a ton growing up because I was like this soul that wanted to just like be free and be who I really am, which doesn't fit this construct of reality that I was born into. And it's like, so when we free that, the potential for greatness is infinite. So for anyone who is listening, if you're suffering, if you're sad, if you're grieving, if you're anxious, you're fearful, you're doubtful, whatever it is, like exactly what you're feeling in this moment that has the potential for the complete opposite when you self-actualize.
Of course, that duality and that polarization.
Yeah.
So good. And that's why it's so important for people to connect with themselves, to connect with their desires, to connect with understanding.
Yeah.
You know, what I'm hearing most is this deep, deep understanding of yourself.
Yeah.
From your physical desires to your emotions to your spirit, all of it, and that you're taking that all in and you're realizing this is who I am, this is what I want, and it's okay to ask and express what I am and what I want.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I know that we're kind of wrapping up for today, but where can people find you?
Yeah, come find me on the Instagrams. That's like the best place to find me, which is at KAT_TRIMARCO. And then my website is www.kattrimarco.com, which is KATTRIMARCO.com, and Facebook, Kat Trimarco.
That's funny that you say www.
Is that not a normal?
No, nobody says that anymore.
Am I being Canadian?
Maybe you're being Canadian, but we'll put those as
HTTP colon slash
dot. But we'll put all of those in the footnotes here too, so that people can just click through to find you. And of course, if you're seeing this before August 18th, on August 18th from 1:30 to 4:30 is Discovering Your Sexual Wiring class here at Liberate Hollywood. Maybe we I don't know, maybe we can even have it filmed and stuff too. We'll talk about that later, but I'm sure there'll be more classes after that, so always check in on our calendars. Follow Kat around and see where else she's teaching classes and doing some work and one-on-ones. What would you like to leave everybody with?
If you're in LA or you want to fly out here, come spend 3 hours with me at this beautiful sanctuary, Liberate Hollywood. That's what I have to say. Come actually experience the transformation. It's so easy to like sit at home and hear things, right? And like hear a cool podcast and be like, yeah, and really resonate with something. But like, come physically move your body and get here and be in that energy of transformation. And that's where magic happens. So anyone who's hearing this and is inspired and like, wow, I resonate so much, or even kind of maybe experiencing some fear around it, come play, come hang out. It's I want everyone to know too that it's of greatest importance to me to create a space of high integrity around sexual education and around exploring this area of our lives, and that you feel safe that you feel safe in your own body, that you feel safe in the space, that you feel safe to learn. And so if you're on the fence or you're experiencing a little bit of fear, even a little bit of resistance, I encourage you to lean into that and just know that you're going to be held in a very safe space, and that it is without a doubt going to unlock and transform something really beautiful inside. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
for
so much for this
me.
amazing talk.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And until next time.
If you enjoyed this conversation, like it, subscribe, and share it with your friends. If you want some more amazing resources on your path of liberation, head over to liberateyourself.com and sign up for our mailing list. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram at Liberate Hollywood, all one word, or Liberate Emporium, all one word. Until next time, liberate yourself.